This is Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom, words on leadership, goal setting, productivity, and a whole lot more. I trust today this will be like a vitamin or a supplement for your mind and heart. And wherever you receive podcasts from, would you please subscribe to Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom and leave a rating and a brief written review? Especially helpful if you're listening via iTunes. But you can receive this podcast from anywhere podcasts originate: Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, iTunes, and so forth. Thanks for joining today. We're going to continue with a little bit of where we were at our last podcast about what do you do when you have to reset. And so one of the things that must take place during a reset, it's really a time to take stock, to really evaluate where you are, what's happening, what needs to be happening. Maybe it's time to take yourself into the shop and have a little bit of a tune-up. There are some areas where you'll want to pay close attention. Your thinking, it is easy for our thinking to become infected with whatever is happening all around us. And right now, all around us are different kinds of voices. You have political voices, philosophical voices. You have all sorts of people clamoring for your attention. There are those running around saying the sky is falling, those who just say things are going to get better. And the problem is it's easy for us to get caught up in the emotion of what's transpiring right now, and that is certainly true for leaders. So as we look at everything globally, you also are responsible for looking at things up close. It'll also depend on how is your family doing? How is your business doing? How are your own personal economics and financial well-being? But one of the things you have to do in these kinds of times is you have to think like the leader. You are the leader. You cannot just focus on the crisis and just focus on what's happening today. You have to get yourself, your family, your business, your enterprise, your friends, the little club that you're involved with, whatever it is, you have to get them prepared for moving into the future. We have to, as a leader, we have to stand in the midst of the howling winds of all of the things that are going on and begin to think like leaders. What do I need to do? How do we need together to go forward? What are the things we may very well need to abandon and stop? What are the things we need to start doing? How can I make sure, with as much as lies within me, that we're going to move ahead? It's not just thinking. You have to think strategically, obviously. You have to conduct yourself like a leader. Leaders cannot afford to lose their heads. Now, leaders get as fearful. Leaders have pangs of anxiety like everyone else. But here's what you kind of have to do. You kind of have to go in the room and close the door and cry and wail and scream. Call your mom, call a friend, call your counselor. Just whatever you need to do to get yourself in a right frame of mind. And then when you've cried, when you've thought it through, when you've had the meltdown, then you have to go out and conduct yourself like the leader. You have to go out and say, here's what we're going to do. I know it's difficult today, but here are the things we're going to do. We still have the same mission. We still have the same vision. Yes, things are changing, but here is what we're going to do. And you have to throw your shoulders back and conduct yourself as a confident leader. You may say, Dr. Ron, I don't feel confident. Well, go back into that same room I invited you into a few moments ago. Close the door and either pray or read or study until you have a growing sense that you are where you are supposed to be. If you felt like you were where you were supposed to be before the crisis that's happening around you right now, then you're still supposed to be there unless you've been told differently. So pick yourself up, dust yourself off, conduct yourself like the leader you are. It's a hard and almost counterintuitive, but these kinds of difficult times are marvelous times to grow as a leader. And so as you're doing a tune-up, it may be that all hands have had to be on deck. Everybody has had to operate in areas maybe where they weren't the strongest. We just had to keep things alive and moving, and we all understand that, and we all go through that. But don't neglect growing. It would be great. Go back into the room I've now invited you into for the third time. Shut the door and just ask yourself a series of questions. What have I learned in all of this? What would I do differently? What did I see that really now has come home to me that is vitally important for me as an individual or for our organization? If you've gotten off a growth plan, if you've cut back on your reading and watching and observing, then it'd be a great time in a tune-up time to just recommit yourself to being a growing leader. Then just know that you are where you are for a reason and for a purpose. And anyone can lead when the sun is shining and the wind is prevailing and there's money in the bank and everyone is for us. But it takes a special gifted leader to lead when the storm clouds are bursting, when lightning and thunder, when everyone thinks they're not going to make it, when the organization is reeling. You need to know that your leadership was created. You were created to be a leader for such a time as this. Don't be fearful. Go for it. You can do it. Now, what are, as we're having our leadership tune-up in the midst of a crisis, what would be some things that we need to evaluate? Well, I think when you're in the midst of a crisis, one of the first things you need to look at is it's going to demand out of all of us a sense of humility. If a few months ago you thought you knew it all, you thought you had some great long-range and long-term plans, if nothing else, the recent crisis has sort of humbled us a little bit. That as much as we can plan and prepare, and we should, much of life is out of our control. You can only control what you can control. And so rather than that making you fearful or discouraged or say, what's the use? What it really ought to do is remind you that I needed to be a humble leader. I will do what I can do. I will do the best that I can do. I will dream, I will plan, I will strategize, I will be loyal to the vision and the mission, but also know that we may have to turn on a dime, and it may be that we have to go other directions, and it keeps you grounded, and it keeps you humble, and it keeps you looking at other situations and gets you expanding beyond yourself. If there's anything else that I know as we're having a leadership tune-up, that this crisis has sure beaten all the complacency out of people. You know, when things are going well and one day looks like the next day and week after week and month after month, everything is pretty much routine and the same. And then you throw in what we have been facing, and one thing that goes right out the window is complacency. We've learned that you can't always rely on past learning, past situations, or that tomorrow will always look like today. We now understand in pretty stark terms that more than likely most of the tomorrows will not look anything like today, and they won't even remotely look like anything in the past. And so I think we've all been jarred out of our sense of complacency to the point that we need to get into dependency. If you're a spiritual person, that's dependency upon God, but it means I have to be paying attention. I can no longer run my life on autopilot. I think another part of our tune-up for leaders is the crisis helps us to realize our comfort zone isn't as comfortable as we thought it was. We have all been forced in recent weeks and months to get uncomfortable. If you haven't been made uncomfortable in recent days as a leader, then I'm not sure where you've been or what you've been doing or if you've been paying any attention. We all have a tendency to default to our comfort zone. This is the way I've always done this. This is the way I've always conducted this. And right now we have found that we've been stretched outside of the boundaries of our comfort zone. And we're going to have to actually expand the territory of our comfort zone. I'm not really sure where I sit today that we'll ever go back to the old measurements of what our comfort zone was 8-10 months ago. You are probably going to be living in a new comfort zone, and that's something you need to examine as you do a leadership tune-up. Another thing that I can say is that these times of trouble as I'm doing a tune-up have made us be more agile. In the not-for-profit and church space, many churches who never had a live streaming service, you can hardly find a church of any size or description that isn't at least on Facebook Live. 9 months ago, that was not happening. We've all learned that because we're out of our comfort zone, things are out of our control, we've had to become more agile. And I have actually been amazed at the quality of some of these things that I am seeing. We've all had to develop nimbleness. We've had to move quickly. We've had to move on a dime. We have found that you can have meetings electronically. We have found that you can expand. You can move in directions that you never imagined. So in your tune-up, you might ask yourself as a leader, have I become more agile as a leader? Have I learned to move a little more quickly? I think your tune-up for leadership also would say that during this time, I'm imagining your perspective has changed. This situation that we're going through has broadened our perspective. We've begun to realize that a lot of things that we held dear were not as important. And yet the other thing that is true is we have discovered that there are values and things that are so important that we can't let them go. And it broadens your perspective. It's made us take an inward look and evaluate ourselves and where we are. And so in this tune-up process for leadership, how has your perspective changed for yourself, your family, your business? What has changed in your perspective? Now, many people think that all of those who are working from home and all of that it's some things have fallen by the wayside. Here's what I've discovered as I'm doing a tune-up of my own leadership is that this kind of a crisis has forced me to be more organized, because if we just go through the motions, we're not going to get a lot of things done. A lot of things are going to fall by the wayside. So I have had to get myself organized. So as you're doing a tune-up for leadership, I would just ask you, what organizational things have changed in your life? Are there areas where you have let them slide that maybe you need to re-engage with? What are some new organizational handles that you have gotten that you are going to implement and take with you, even if things go back to some semblance of whatever normal looks like? Another thing that I'm seeing in my tune-up, as I'm doing a tune-up of my leadership, following and going through all of this, is I've had to innovate. Again, there are just some things that you used to do that you're not able to do, or at least able to do in the same manner. And we've had to find creativity and innovation. Rarely does creativity and innovation come during the humdrum of life. Innovation rarely happens when we're just continuing on and everything is running smoothly and everything seems to be going in a positive direction. But when things get a little out of hand, it forces us to learn the wonderful skill of innovation. So as you're doing your leadership tune-up right now, ask yourself, have I learned to innovate? Are there some things that I've innovated that have really made a difference and have really helped me during this time? As you're doing your leadership tune-up, remember this, that problems create resilience in leaders. You don't learn to be resilient doing the comfortable, or when the seas are smooth and the sailing is easy. Resilience is developed in difficult times. And so I just would say, as you're doing kind of a tune-up and evaluating of your leadership, In what ways are you more resilient today than you were 6 to 8 months ago? It's a great question to ask yourself. And finally, as you're doing your tune-up for leadership, I think one thing that will come to your mind is that difficult times prepare you for the next battle. Nothing you have learned will be wasted. Nothing you've experienced is ever for naught. You will now be prepared for the next battle. Now, here's the key. None of us today exactly know what our next battle is going to be, what it's going to look like, and how it's going to affect us. But the fact of the matter is, what we are going through right now is preparing us emotionally, spiritually, mentally, experientially. It's helping us in areas of agility and perspective and being organized and innovating. And it's taught us resilience. So what you're going through today, I guarantee you, has not been wasted. Whether it's with your child, whether it's with a coworker, whether it's a financial situation, it's preparing you for what lies ahead and your next battle. You've been listening to Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom, words on leadership, goal setting, productivity, and a whole lot more. I trust today, my friend, this was like a vitamin or a supplement for your mind and heart. And wherever you receive podcasts from, would you please subscribe to Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom? Leave a rating and a brief written review. It will help other excellent people like you to be able to discover this podcast. Remember, my leadership friend, you are doing better than you think you are. You really are. And until next time, this is Dr. Ron saying, have a great and blessed day.